All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So, part 3 of this Trayvon Martin documentary. My goodness. Like I said before, this is a very exhausting series to follow just because it opens so many wounds. And it's like, man, sometimes you emotionally don't want to be taken to a place. And so I'm literally only doing this because some of you have been asking me to keep it going. But I'm over this documentary, to be honest. But I will say this, because it's a lot going on. Plus, I just saw the Black Klansman movie, which was actually pretty good. You should watch it. And then the Aretha Franklin thing going on. I'm like, man, it's a lot going on this week. So if you're one of those people who, you know, things like this really just dig into the bad vibes of your emotions and everything like that, I would definitely say find something else to counterbalance this kind of energy that you get from watching something like this. Just because you don't want to go to sleep with that on your heart. Because it doesn't help that this airs at like 10 o'clock. And most people are probably going to bed at 11 if they have a 9 to 5. So, you know, people who are, you know, watching this and it's pulling out all kind of bad emotions, then they got to go to bed with this on their heart. So try to find something to counterbalance that. If it's like, you know, a favorite book or some favorite musical artist you like to listen to, or a project, find something to do. Just give yourself like an extra 20 minutes before you go to sleep to kind of, you know, decompress. Get some of that out of your system. Anyway, so with this one, like I said, I think I'm glad I didn't jump the gun too quick when I was giving my first critique in the very first episode of this review, because they've really been dissecting a bunch of different layers with each episode that I've seen so far. And today's dissection was really about George Zimmerman's character and the fact that America is the most hypocritical country when it comes to race and the moral compass that people believe that they have. But what got me with the George Zimmerman bit was, I was like, oh, so he wasn't eligible to become a police officer because he had a record, and on that record was resisting arrest. I said, oh, not George Zimmerman. Not the good Christian, wholesome George Zimmerman that was such a victim of the big giant monster Trayvon. My goodness. Because, you know, according to the comment section that y'all have been leaving me, you know, the comments that I've been reading from so many crazy people who've showed up, and then just the commentary I remember from when the trial was on TV, and just, you know, the entire response from a lot of people in the country, it was, you know, George Zimmerman was this innocent guy and he was doing nothing wrong, and, you know, he was patrolling the neighborhood, and Trayvon Martin was, you know, just this big crazy giant thug, and he was violent, and he's the reason 9/11 happened, and, you know, he was on all kind of drugs and heroin and coke, and he killed his mom, and his dad was a deadbeat father, and this, that, and the third, and his brother shot Tupac. Like, literally, that was the narrative that was being put out there. And so I was like, oh, so George Zimmerman resisting arrest, huh? And he's still alive to talk about it, huh? Because of course I was like, you know, when it was Eric Garner and Philando Castile and everybody else, y'all had all the reasons in the world why they deserved to die, because allegedly they weren't being cooperative with the police. They were resisting. They needed to die. So I'm like, George Zimmerman's walking around, so is his bullet on the way or what? That's all I'm asking. Anyway, so I found that interesting. I was like, George Zimmerman's character, I said, for all you people who thought he was one of the 12 disciples, I said, your story is falling apart, because this man, in addition to resisting arrest, I'm like, okay, and then he lied about the amount of money that they had, him and the wife, so now the wife got to get charged for perjury because they done lied and said, you know, we're on financial hardship. We don't have enough money to pay for the defense. This, that, and the third, and they done got all kind of money. And they speaking in code and trying to do all kind of shenanigans on the little prison phone. And I'm like, so now your girlfriend got to catch a charge. And then the part that made it even funnier, I'm like, then you even lie about the passports. You got 2 passports, and you're trying to get your little, you know, passport back. They were claiming that he was considering leaving the country. I don't think he was going to do that. He wasn't going nowhere, because I think he knew he was going to get off anyway. And so I'm like, you know, your whole story's falling apart, and everything that made you such a wholesome person is starting to blow up in your face. And the fact that people in his inner circle were like, yeah, this dude was racist as hell, definitely. And that video that they showed where they were in DC in the car, and he's pretty much mocking, you know, black people and this, that, and the third, and trying to speak with the little black dialect that he envisioned of how he's, you know, believes that black people would speak. I said, yeah, that's Georgie. My goodness. But the part that really stuck out to me was how they described that he and the wife had a really big fight the night of the murder. I said, okay, so can we put some pieces together, and let's play mental health doctor for a second. So if you have a person who's already one step off the Richter, just a little loony, because he's taken this job as neighborhood watch a little too seriously, to the point where he's called the police 50 times. And so now the wife is even like, dude, you're losing it. You're like obsessed with this. You're kind of crazy. And it's already been kind of proven that, one, you don't like black folks and everything like that. So boom, the wife leaves. I don't know if you've ever been around somebody who's been heartbroken or just got dumped, but usually they're pretty irate. Anything will set them off. They're emotionally unstable. They're ready to fight. They don't have it together. So imagine what it must be like if you have somebody who gets their heart broken because the wife is like, I'm out, you crazy dude. And so he sees his entire life fall apart. And so what does he go to? He goes to the thing that makes him happy, neighborhood patrol. He gets in the neighborhood patrol, and guess who he sees? He sees Trayvon Martin, somebody who belongs in a demographic in which he despises and cannot stand. And because the documentary did a great job of talking about how you now had people who were Section 8 also living in that area and people with housing vouchers, George Zimmerman already has a perception of everybody in that neighborhood who does not look like him, who has discolored skin. He's assuming they are all some Section 8 people robbing the system, on top of the fact that they were talking about there were some break-ins. So, when you have all of that going on and you see Trayvon walking around and this, that, and the third, and you're already emotionally heartbroken, oh yes, I believe that might just be a great trigger for the element of aggression. That would make sense as to why he continued to follow this kid. That would make sense as to why there might have been a scuffle. Like I said before, I don't buy the whole narrative of Trayvon attacked Zimmerman and was like, what are you doing? And no, now you're going to get it now. Yeah, right. I think Trayvon defended himself, and I think George Zimmerman wasn't in the shape that he thought he was in and lost the fight and got mad and shot Trayvon. That's what that was about. You're going to try to shake the table and can't fight, get beat up. Now you want to shoot somebody. Talking about you were standing your ground. Anyway, but yeah, this was just an interesting episode. And it was interesting just to see the culture and the climate of America. Because the thing is, a lot of times, because we all live in our own world, sometimes you don't even see the other perspective and how people do things. And really, when this trial was going on, I personally started to make an effort to not really watch the news as much and not really invest or give a lot of energy to what was going on, because I was seeing the ugly side. And I'm like, y'all not about to have me stressed out every night with this crap. And so this was kind of a reminder of where the country was. And you saw all the people who were, justice for Zimmerman, and we stand behind him, and they got Zimmerman on the cross. And if you saw that picture with Zimmerman on the cross, you saw the little blood from the back of his head where he was allegedly being beaten to the concrete. And I was like, okay, so is that the crown of thorns people, really? And I found it interesting that, really white evangelicals, especially the extreme right wing, were very, very, very supportive of Zimmerman, especially, with everything going on. I was like, that's interesting because, with all the characteristics and the things that he's done, I think that would go against the religious beliefs about, not killing and everything like that. But, I forgot. Yeah, everybody is not God's children according to certain groups of people. So you got to look a certain part. You know what I mean? And so I found that very, very interesting. Like, goodness, especially when Zimmerman went on that interview and said it was a part of God's plan. I was like, God didn't tell you to kill nobody. That was you just being yourself. You felt some kind of way and decided to kill somebody. God didn't tell you to kill nobody. That's kind of like when Bush had said that God told him to go to Iraq. Okay, so God told you to go to Iraq and be responsible for the death of over 800,000 people, most unarmed civilians who weren't in any kind of military. And I'm not saying we went and shot 800,000 people, but 800,000 people ended up dying. Whether it was long-term results, whether it was being collateral from the explosions, hitting wrong targets, all that. Whew, some of y'all, I don't know what kind of heaven y'all gonna be in, but I would hate to spend eternity with some of y'all. My goodness. So that was that. And they also talked about, and I talked about this, I think, in the first or second review, where I was talking about how within the Latino community, sometimes people will pass as white, or they will pass and align with whiteness, even though physically they don't really always look white, but there's a privilege that can come there when you pretty much are an agent for white supremacy. You know what I mean? And so Zimmerman got that benefit. Now here's the thing, because I like that, what's her name? Joy Reid talked about that, and how, George Zimmerman wasn't even white. And some of the most racist white people in the country were standing so strong behind him. And I think that the ideology behind that is, like I said, people can be agents for white supremacy. And people who are racist will stand behind them as long as those people don't start getting too far ahead. As long as they're within their place. So like the whole Diamond and Silk chick, the two Stump for Trump sisters, white people love them. But best believe, let them get into some kind of position of power, or let them get something in which people who are extremely racist don't feel that they are entitled to. All of a sudden, all that we love you Stump for Trump crap goes out of the window, and then all of a sudden those are two black N words again. Those are two black B words again. That's exactly what happened. If George Zimmerman right now were to come out against Donald Trump and say Donald Trump is the most racist, horrible president, blah, 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 all of them same white people who were running and supporting him and he's doing God's work, all of a sudden George Zimmerman would be Mexican. He'd be a Mexican, something, build the wall. That's how that whole whiteness thing works. You can be an agent of white supremacy when you're doing that job, and they will support and stand behind you. But don't shake the table too much. You better stay in your place. Don't jump out of where you're supposed to be, because then they will remind you of who you are and what you're supposed to be. Omarosa's learning that the hard way. Anyway, and then I also saw the bit about the task force, which I knew that was some BS. I was like, yeah, so the task force that was going to invest the stand your ground laws and see if it was really, if it made sense, if they needed to change some things. I was like, that's pretty much like when the police investigate themselves. There will be a full investigation. We investigated ourselves. We discovered we did nothing wrong. Thank you for your time. That's pretty much what that was. That's kind of like when you're in elementary and your teacher was fool enough to let you guys grade your own papers. Like, why? You setting it up. Because, of course, if you one of them kids and you done got about too many questions wrong, you had that pencil, no. Because my dad already said I wasn't going to play no more baseball if I brought one more bad grade. So I got 9 out of 10. Really, you got 6. Okay? Same thing. But, yeah, pretty much the documentary does a great job of talking about how this was pretty much a trial of Trayvon. You know what I mean? Like, pretty much the energy. And even, like, with the comments that will come on this video, because I know there's going to be some, all the comments will be directed towards Trayvon. It will be about how Trayvon did this. I think some idiot just wrote something on my last video about where I was talking about the whole iced tea and the Skittles thing. It wasn't iced tea. It was a watermelon drink because he was going to make lean. I'm like, okay, if it was lean, if it was marijuana, those aren't drugs that would make you violent anyway. And the thing about and even when you talk about the drug narrative, a drug culture, it's the funniest thing because, y'all love Willie Nelson and his narrative of I sat on the White House and I smoked. Yeah, that's great. And Woodstock 69, yeah, smoke on, we smoking, yeah. And then even Miley Cyrus hosted VMAs. Remember when she closed and did one of her songs and so what, I get high. I don't even remember the song, but yeah, that's so cool. She's just so awesome. She's a pioneer of women's rights. She's stepping out there, man. She's really giving it to them. And so, when certain groups of people do something like weed, it's not a problem. But when it's black people, then all of a sudden, we are the cast of menace to society and boys in the hood. And, we're part of the Haitian cocaine mafia. I can't just entertain it. At least if y'all were trying to push the PCP narrative, that would have made sense. That would make somebody like Trayvon be aggressive. But, THC that's in weed does not make somebody aggressive. And something that, like lean, makes people delayed. So, yeah. I just wish y'all would get your narratives right. And then the depositions, whoa, it was so much. This was the most triggering episode because the way that they were asking the mother and the father them stupid questions, and then everybody that was in Trayvon Martin's circle as if they were the ones on trial. Pretty much, I think the origin behind that is pretty much trying to destroy all credibility of anybody associated with Trayvon Martin because they literally needed to push the narrative that George Zimmerman was this innocent person. Trayvon is this troubled kid from a troubled past with a troubled background, and everybody who's around him is troubled as well, which is why they were asking all these random questions about everything. And the dad, did you have tattoos? Did you know he had tattoos? I was like, what do tattoos have to do with anything? Okay, I know soccer moms who get a tattoo of each child's name on their wrist or on their ankle. I'm like, is that in the same caliber of Trayvon's father getting a tattoo? You know what I mean? Like, it's so easy to demonize and vilify the image of certain groups of people when you want to push a narrative. And this country is so well known for doing that. Black people, we just can't be anything in this country. It's ridiculous. And then even with the jury selection, and of course, listening to the people who were on, in consideration and how so many of them thought that Trayvon Martin's father wasn't in his life. I was like, I guess y'all don't understand how custody works when people get divorced or separated. His father never walked out of his life. I don't know where y'all got that from, but it's funny that was pretty much the narrative you automatically assume because you found out he didn't live initially with the father, even though he was with the father when he died. You know what I mean? That's who, that's the custody that he was in at the time when he passed. But it's interesting. And I noticed that they did talk about the jury selection and how, of course, the prosecution wanted to steer away from race, which again, it's hard to really trust the prosecution when, the person who's pretty much overseeing the case already has a negative history with black people anyway. They weren't going to throw out all of the stops and do all that they needed to do to make sure Trayvon Martin got justice. Really, I believe this, and a lot of people said this as well, they pretty much charged George Zimmerman so there wouldn't be a riot, so people would shut up. There was no real long-term goal for Zimmerman to ever do any jail time, to be honest. So I'm glad that they addressed that. And they did talk about just the racial makeup of the jury and everything like that. And I will say it was noticeable that all the black people were struck from the jury. And literally, I remember the last time I had jury duty. When I tell you they struck me so quick, because the question, well, actually, here's a quick synopsis. It was a case, it was like some young black kid. He got into some kind of situation with the police. It was like a resisting arrest charge or something. He made it out alive. Amen. But when I was going before the questioning, one of the main questions they asked me was like, okay, well, do you have a negative perception of police? And so my response was like, I don't know how you expect me not to have, or I don't know how you expect me to have a 100% positive one. in this day and age where all of, what's going on in the country is going on, as a black man, I can't sit here and lie and say that I have the most positive perception of police. And then before you know it, I was dismissed. I was like, well, dang. And so it's like, well, so much for that. But yeah, it was interesting to see that. And I like that they brought that up about the narrative of, if you have an all-black jury, will they be capable of being fair? But for some reason, that burden wasn't on an all-white jury. And it made me think back to when you saw the People vs. OJ series and how the prosecutor had the opposite viewpoint. She welcomed all the black people in the jury because she was like, oh, I feel that they'll be capable of, being unbiased and it should just work out just fine. And listen, ever since that OJ case, they done learned. Don't have no black people on the jury when it's any kind of racially motivated case. Get them out of there because they're going to be too emotional and they're going to vote in favor of the person that looks like them. Get them out of there. That's what that was about. But anyway, it's on a 2-week break, so I can sleep good on the next Monday, fortunately. And so, yeah, share your thoughts. This has been a lot to follow. But my goodness, this case really brought out the ugly in a lot of people. I will say that. But yeah, that's it. I'm out. Subscribe.